I'll get you a satanic mechanic. I feel like he crunches his esophagus into his spinal column, which is an awkward thing to say because he has had a stroke and he's in a wheelchair now.
Woof. Hey, welcome to Your Inner Child is an Idiot, the podcast where we look back on things from our childhood and see if they were any good. My name is DJ.
Hi, DJ. First off, I want to thank you for the birthday gift of
You're welcome.
Letting me watch one of my favorite movies for our podcast. The podcast that we just record on our own and then email to each other.
So, surprise. We like this movie, but
it's been great recording with you. Here's our patrons.
So we're gonna watch Clue, from the year that Damon will say when I point to the screen.
1987.
Is that right?
You know what? If I put money, I would feel confident, but I would probably also just put money on black.
Ooh. 1985.
Fuck.
Earlier than I thought.
Yeah, the CGI, now that I think about it, the CGI on this is pretty rudimentary, so.
While I'm here, Tim Curry, Leslie Ann Warren, Madeline Kahn. That's what you were waiting for.
That's my lady.
Christopher Lloyd, of course, Colleen Camp, Martin Mull, Michael McKean, and others.
And the rest.
I know you. So you love this movie. This is a known quantity. I have enjoyed this movie. I watched it again with Lauren last Halloween because that's the kind of movie that we like to watch on Halloween because it's not scary at all.
But there is lightning and thunder, so there's an element of scariness.
It's got a little bit of a. I know
you never know when the lightning's gonna strike.
Yeah. It's got that like kind of Halloween-y vibe. It's a murder mystery. It's a spooky house. I know we're past spooky season now, but
did you know that
honest.
57% of all murders occur on Halloween?
Is that true?
No,
absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Not even remotely true.
Why? I'm offended that you would even ask if it was true.
It's like, what is this? The fucking Purge? Get out of here.
So we watched this last year. So that's the most recent time I've seen it. And this has happened a couple of times that I've watched Clue over the years. I tend to start to kind of zone out around 2/3 of the way through. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't make me like hate the movie, but I have to bring that up because
DJ, thank you for
Do you think that's fair?
The funny thing about Clue, I don't watch it super regularly, but probably maybe once every 2 years now that I'm firmly in my adulthood, I'll sit down and watch Clue. The funny thing to me is that it is I'm the opposite in that I started and I'm like, is it always so slow? And it feels like, I always associate this movie with being sort of zany and like fast paced. And I think that the movie, at least for me, like it gets more and more, it's like a perpetual motion machine. It like gets faster and faster and faster as it goes. And it starts out really slow and not super funny. And I'm very conscious of it because this is one of those movies that when I'm torturing those I love, that I'm like, let's watch this. And I'll just watch you watch it and gauge our friendship based on your reaction to it. Okay. And every time, that anxiety of having someone watch one of your favorite movies, I'm just like, is it always so slow? Why is there no jokes at the beginning of this movie? It's just very awkward. But then it really speeds up as it goes. Especially like, I feel like at the 2/3 mark is when like Tim Curry sort of like blows in a good way the last act and it's just like, I'm gonna just recount the entire movie that we've been through already at like a frenetic sweaty pace.
See, that feels like
everyone
the end
else is just sort
me.
of chasing through the thing. It's the whole like last third of the movie is like recounting what you've already seen.
Maybe it's I'll have to see if it happens again, if the lull happens to me again, and I'll have to pay closer attention to where it happens. Although I'll be paying closer attention because I'll be taking notes for a podcast that I'm
It's
going to
not it's not a
with
great
my
case
other
study.
podcast co-host.
What?
Schmayman.
Oh, I might have known. Schmayman!
Now we have BJ and Schmayman.
Our arch nemesis. But you know what? Schmayman, you're alike, you and I.
Did you play the
I hate you,
board game
but I respect
Clue
you.
a lot?
Not really a lot. We've talked previously on the show about my lack of friends in high school and middle school. Hard to get a board game going when there's literally no one around.
Oh, buddy.
I think, though, we occasionally will pull a Clue out for holidays, high holy days, feast days. I think a few years ago we played Clue Master Detective, which is the only version of the game that we have in our home.
Okay.
It was a favorite. I can't remember who won that game, so it must not have been me because I would have tattooed that into my brain. Had I won.
You'd be still riding high on that hog.
Mm-hmm. This is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's one of my favorite movies to quote. It is
Flames.
Oh my God.
It's
such. I will talk about that movie, that moment in depth when we get to the other half of this podcast. But I remember, though, it was a movie that we rented a lot in maybe the early 90s. And then there was sort of a period where we didn't rent it as much, and it never really was on TV. And then one time we saw, probably for Halloween, Comedy Central was going to have a fleet of like scary-ish movies. So just so you know, your thinking is very similar a late 90s, early 2000s Comedy Central executive.
They were very formative to me. The executives.
It must have been the 90s because me and my brother were like, we have to record this off of the television onto video cassette so we can watch it whenever we want. So we did and that became
worse and worse quality as we do so.
And we'll have to like pause the recording to get these commercials out of here, and then replay when the commercials are over. Anyway, it must have been in the 90s because that was all on VHS. And I think we thought we had struck gold because then we could watch it all we wanted, which is fantastic. And then it was one of those movies that was always like $5 DVD. Whenever you went anywhere, there was a $5 DVD of Clue. However, it is one, I feel like it's very similar. I put it in the same box as The Princess Bride in that I don't remember anyone seeing it in theaters. Everyone knows it from renting it as a kid or catching it on TV.
Like 3 years old.
Well, that's true, but I still don't know of anyone that actually. It feels like a cult movie that people rented. Like you never. Yeah. Stop ruining my story about never seeing it in theaters. Yeah, it doesn't make sense that I would see it in theaters.
I'm just picturing you like smoking a stogie and people like, sir, you need to put that out in the movie theater.
It's the scene in Citizen Kane, not Citizen Kane, Cape Fear, where I'm just laughing in a Hawaiian shirt, smoking a cigar, and annoying Nick Nolte's family in the back row while I laugh at Madeline
as
Kahn.
a 3-year-old.
But then I feel like it's one of those movies now that everyone around our age is sort of familiar with. Kind of like The Princess Bride, in that we all saw it at some point. But apparently they released it with 3 different endings in theaters. Like you would see each ending depending on what theater you saw it in.
Really? And
it was only on video that you saw the 3 endings sort of cobbled together, which I think is actually, I mean, I haven't seen this theatrical version where you would see one ending and that's it. But I feel like the movie works better with the 3 endings.
Oh yeah, I loved the 3 endings.
Yeah.
That's like probably my favorite part is the frenetic reenacting of everything and then they're like, okay, but here's what actually or it was like, what does it say? Like here, that's how it might have happened.
But how about this?
Yeah.
And then they just throw another one in. And then there is one that says, but here's what actually happened.
Yeah. Love that. That's great. Let's see if it holds up from the last time you watched it last week.
I have it on mute here off to the side. It's always playing at my house.
Tell me about, you have a slight I wouldn't say obsession is the wrong word. You have a strong affinity for Madeline Kahn. Does it come from this movie exclusively? What else?
I mean, this was probably the first movie I ever saw with her in it. I was 3 when it came out.
Right.
So it'd be hard to get in just earlier than Clue. My first words were Madeline Kahn.
You began memorizing semi-obscure actresses from a bygone era because you knew that later it would be a big part of your comedic stylings.
I don't know. There's something about and this probably there's probably some sexism here, but I hate it when attractive men are funny, which seems to be the new norm in stand-up comedians, that like men, like all stand-up comedians are like super jacked now and like oddly attractive. And I'm like, what is this? Where are all the ugly horse-faced men I grew up with? Where's our Richard Belzers and our Jerry Seinfelds? Seinfeld or say Seinfelds, but don't say both, DJ.
Okay.
It just doesn't work. You just can't
you want to retake
throw
it?
S's around. Nah, keep it. But I love it when pretty ladies are funny. And Madeline Kahn is a very pretty lady who is funny. I think she has a weird, chaotic nature to her. It's like she's very... in this movie, she is a widower.
Yeah.
No, wrong.
A widow.
She is a widow. But, gender is fluid, so come on, It's a construct. She could be a widower if she wants.
Yeah, you're right.
She is a widow in this, and she's like she's got a veil when she first arrives. She's all in black, and slowly, takes off her veil, like at the halfway point, like switches to takes off her overcoat. But what I'm saying is, she's very like prim and proper, or as Tim Curry calls her, pale and tragic, when she first arrives in the movie, and like slowly she becomes a little bit more unhinged until like the apotheosis, which is her flames monologue that everyone has memorized. But even like movies like High Anxiety, which is Mel Brooks's like take on Hitchcock movies, she also is very like high energy, chaotic, frenetic, frenzied woman who has the appearance of someone who's got her shit together, but she is charmingly weird.
Mind.
She's like outside and there's a really great scene where she gets where, you know what? I'm not going to tell it.
I'm about to see it. I'll see it.
All this to say she's great. So fuck you for ever maligning her name.
Okay. We're going to watch Clue. Watch along with us. We'll be right back. I'm going to describe how to support us on Patreon by reenacting it a la Tim Curry at the end of Clue. Okay, so you're going to run to your computer. But then you notice your child is on the computer, still schooling from home, and so you have to run back to the kitchen where you left your phone. Then you're going to open your phone, go to Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Shit, I fucked that up. Open your phone.
Get on with it!
You're going to open your phone. To make a long story short.
Too late.
You're going to go to Hypertext Transfer Protocol, / World Wide Web, period. Your inner child is an idiot, period, commercial. And there you'll find a way to sign up. You're going to sign up for, $1 an episode, $5 an episode, $800 an episode, whatever you want to do.
Oh, I don't know what that level would be. I feel like I'd have to like sit on their lap or something weird.
$800 an episode.
Pics.
We will pretty much do whatever they do on OnlyFans. And I don't know. I definitely don't know about it, so.
It's a perfectly upstanding website. Just don't start a sex worker website and then try and get rid of all the sex workers.
Yeah, that's...
If you don't want sex workers there, don't start a site that's obviously designed for sex work.
If you want one that wasn't, but could be, your inner child's an idiot. And we are back. We watched Clue.
Yes.
It seems like there's more words to it, but it's just a one-word title.
I mean, if you need to fill like if you're writing a song where Clue is part of it, but you still have 2 beats or 3 beats. Clue the movie, or Clue Woo Woo.
Clue Woo Woo is what I would do.
I know you do a lot of doo-wop groups, so they can do the woo-woo-woos.
Clue, ooh, ooh, ooh. And you don't know if they're just saying ooh after the word clue or if they're continuing the word clue.
Are they grossed out by Clue?
It's really up to the interpretation of the listener, in my opinion.
You're such an artist.
Yeah.
That's what I like about you.
Not directed by John Landis, but written by John Landis.
It always confused me because it's co-written by Jonathan Landis, but written and directed by Jonathan Lynn. I feel like there should be a rule, like one of you has to change your name.
Yeah, you can't
have Jonathan Lynn and John Landis co-writing together.
That's too confusing.
Get
I can't handle it.
Hey, Richard Bachman, borrow it from Stephen King.
Written and directed by John Landis. Sorry.
John Landis.
John Landis. Here's a fun fact.
Please.
Didn't realize that was not Susan Sarandon.
Wait, in what capacity?
What's her name? The one that looks exactly like Susan Sarandon.
Leslie Ann Warren?
Yes. Don't pretend like you don't know.
Did you just sort of turn Rocky Horror Picture Show into
I memory hold it.
Michael McKean is Brad.
Yes.
Leslie Ann Warren plays Janet, and then Susan Sarandon plays Mrs. Scarlet, and I don't remember the gentleman who plays Brad in real life.
I do think Leslie Ann Warren looks way more like Susan Sarandon than Brad and Michael McKean look alike, although they do have many similarities.
They've got a similar vibe.
They've got the characters.
STE.
Yeah. The immediately sitting down when he says sit to the dogs. That's a good bit. It's a
solid bit.
Yeah.
Do you want to recap? And then I thought we would do the obvious thing and get the quotes out of the way and just get them out of our system.
Unfortunately, that's all I have. So I'll be done when we do that. I don't know if I can. So I'll recap this in the most general way because it's a murder mystery. So it can get kind of complex. But a variety of people are invited to a big, dark, scary house for a dinner party, and they're given pseudonyms, so they don't know each other and they don't know their real names, and the pseudonyms match the board game, Colonel Mustard, et cetera, et cetera. Through the course of the evening, people start dropping like flies. Several people are dead, and they're trying to figure out who did it, why they're all brought there, and we get 3 different endings of what could have happened versus what actually happened, which is that they kind of all did it, and the butler, played by Tim Curry, was actually the person who brought them there and that was blackmailing him the whole time. But then he's shot by Michael McKean, but who's Mr. Green, who is actually working for the FBI, and he's going to go home and have intercourse with his wife.
Weird way to leave. Possibly one of the worst lines from a good movie to end on. It's such a weird line. Yeah, that's fair enough. Good. What have you? Good recap.
It's obviously way more complex than that as far as the actual happenings, but
right. I mean, the story is that they're all being blackmailed by a person named Mr. Body, and they all find out.
Mr. Body.
Get it? And they all find out that he has a web of informants that are also at the house in various roles, and those people start dropping off, and Mr. Body dies, and yada yada yada. So let's get the obvious out of the way. It's a very quotable movie, and I feel like we would just get swamped with quotes. So I feel like we should just get it out of our system.
Is it Ms. White?
Madeline Kahn is Mrs. White.
Mrs. White plays kind of like a Black Widow sort of character, and so someone at one point says, "How many husbands have you had?" She says, "Mine or other women's." Was that her or was that Miss Scarlet?
No, that's her.
Yeah. I thought that was great. That was a good line.
The first line that actually makes me laugh is at some point when they're arriving, Miss Scarlet's car breaks down on the way. She gets picked up by Professor Plum, and they realize they're going to the same event. And they stop at the gate to the house, and Miss Scarlet goes, "Why is the car stopped?" And Christopher Lloyd, just barely peering over his steering wheel, says, "It's frightened." And it always gets a laugh out of me.
Can you keep a secret?
Yes.
So can I. I remember thinking that was really funny as a kid, and I would try to use that.
I remember
it never quite works in real life because people always
careen the conversation that way.
People would always just say no.
No, I'm terrible at it. I'm so glad that I finally have someone to confide in. That I'm so terrible at keeping secrets. And you're like,
I've been holding this in.
Thank you, DJ. Thank you. I do like when they've brought the motorist into the house, and then they're sort of splitting up to look around the house to see if there's anyone else that might be killing these people off. And Colonel Mustard stops to look in the study, and Miss Peacock is like, everything all right? And he's like, oh yeah, 2 corpses, everything's fine.
Yeah. But he says it sincerely because it's like there's no more
corpses, thank God. Yeah. We only have the 2 known corpses that we already were aware of.
I used to quote all the time, just because I say it several times in all the different endings, communism is just a red herring.
Yeah.
And if people had seen the movie, they'd always be like, ah. But otherwise, you're just like, what?
Why'd you say that?
You're just saying that every time someone says the word communism.
I also, as a kid, really liked Wee Wee Madame because it's about pee. Wee Wee Madame. No, I just want that in my nose.
This movie's it's very quotable, and it's also very quotable in the sense that it has it feels like a movie that sprints. You know what I mean? Like there'll be these quick moments and then a pretty big lull in between where there's sort of a lot of exposition, a lot of stuff going on, and then some quick witty, quick delivery lines, and then it kind of goes back to it. And I'm not sure if I dislike that or like it, because if it's I don't know if I could take if the machine gun lines kept going, I might get exhausted by it.
It would get very exhausting. It's a very interesting movie in that it's very quotable, but honestly, I think a lot of the quotes are very specific to the way they are delivered.
Yeah.
I think one of the strengths of this movie is that I was trying to think, it's made in 1985.
Yes.
There's not really, at the time it was made, one of these really breakout stars. None of these people are probably a huge star. I mean, Madeline Kahn, of course, was in part of the Mel Brooks sort of troupe, and she was
Leslie Ann Warren had just done Thelma and Louise.
She kept tweeting at Deborah Messing mean things, which was weird in 1985. Weird. She had to mail 180 character tweets to Deborah Messing, who was in her early 20s. It's a very weird choice. But I think Leslie Ann Warren is probably best known as she was in Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. Madeline Kahn had been nominated for an Oscar, so had Eileen Brennan. Michael McKean would probably be best known from Laverne and Shirley. Christopher Lloyd is probably still best known at this
same
time.
Year as Back to the Future. Yeah,
he's probably still best known as that guy from Taxi. It's a very
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And Tim Curry is also still probably best known for Rocky Horror Picture Show. I mean,
he's probably the biggest star at this point.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I feel like they're all kind of at the same level, and I think they're also a lot of actors who are fairly established in their careers at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think they're very comfortable in playing these sort of comic roles. And I think they also know how to be in an ensemble cast and not try and I was about to say don't chew the scenery, but there's plenty of scenery chewing.
Yeah.
But not I don't feel like they're trying to steal the scene from someone else.
It definitely feels like
it's very much an ensemble cast,
yes.
and it all seems very well weighted. The only odd person out, I would think, is Leslie Ann Warren, but I think she holds her own for the most part amongst these really more comic actors.
Yeah, she does a good job. I mean, he's not a major character, but I mean, the guy who plays Mr. Body is awful. He's high school drama level awful.
I did write, Leaving isn't great, but he's not around for long.
Yeah, well, and it's if anybody's going to get cast that is kind of a weaker actor, it's in those roles, then it's fine. I think the woman that plays Yvette gets more to do, but she doesn't get a ton to do. So I don't really, I mean, she's doing this very fake French accent that's supposed to be fake.
Right. And it is revealed later that it is in fact fake.
And so it's you could dog her accent, but it's also it's kind of supposed to be hacky, Yeah. And I have no idea whether
and she's playing a caricature, and that's also probably, you couldn't, maybe it's a limitation of her acting, but you can also attribute it to her playing a fake French maid. Leaving, who plays Mr. Body, is the frontman for the Los Angeles-based punk band Fear that was popular in the 70s and 80s,
and his name is a verb.
I like a good gerund name. Yeah, he's probably the only odd one out. He's a little stiff, pun, but
That's why they did it.
It's not too bad since he's only really in the first he's only in the movie for maybe 10 minutes, I think, total before he at least fakes his death initially and then really acts out his death shortly thereafter.
It's also like you can kind of, because it's a campier, like silly movie, you can sort of get away with it a little bit more than if it were a dramatic film, like where you'd be like, whoa, this guy is dragging this whole thing. I didn't feel that. I mean, it's noticeable because everybody else is kind of like, it's still, like I said, campy, but they're like giving these, one-liners, and he's also like not a comedic character that much. He's the like immediate villain because he's at least play acting as the person who's blackmailing them when they get there,
Right.
And so he's kind of doing whatever. He's like not acting like prim and proper like everyone else. He's not even pretending, but also.
And he's supposed to be kind of sleazy, which, I mean, he's sort of dressed in the time. I mean, this is the mid-50s, right? Yeah. He's kind of dressed in a kind of like a low-level mobster kind of way. Kind of looks like a good fella.
Your middle management of a.
He's got like two-tone shoes and, just like sort of a sharkskin blazer and that he's just sort of a little skeezy looking.
He's snapping a lot.
He goes to a knife fight in a high school gym.
Yeah.
All the hits. He's got a man in his trunk.
Oh, it's just a guy.
I'm trying to think. While we are criticizing the film, this film does commit one of my biggest pet peeves in movies, which is people wearing glasses are constantly taking off their glasses. At the risk of stepping over a much better Jim Gaffigan bit, like you can't see without your glasses, so you leave your glasses on. And that's why it's always telling. You can tell that Christopher Lloyd actually wears glasses in real life because he never takes off his glasses in this movie. But everyone else is constantly taking them off to make a point and then putting them back on. I think Mrs. Peacock accidentally pokes her own eye with her glasses because she keeps taking them off. It drives me batty. I don't understand why that's a thing. You're wearing glasses because you cannot see. Why would you do that when you're trying to make a point at someone and you can't even see the reaction of the person you just made a point at?
It's such a trope that I didn't even notice it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that's happening a lot, but it's just like, it's such a common like way to emphasize your point, by an actor, that it's like, yeah. I was gonna make fun of when they're eating dinner, what the second course is, but they actually talk about it later because I was like, what are they eating? Pure gelatin? Because it looks like it's like pale white, just like
goo. It looks like pale white goo.
And then later they're like, it's monkey brains.
they started with a course of shark fin soup and then later moved to monkey's brains. I couldn't tell in watching this, the cook in the movie, who sadly is the second to perish, or possibly the first, I can't figure out the timeline of when Mr. Body died. She is Asian American, and if it's like a little bit racist that they're making shark fin soup and then monkey's brains, and then the whole twist is that, I mean, she used to work for Mrs. Peacock, and Mrs. Peacock, at least in two of the endings, kills her. And she thus informed Mr. Body about Mrs. Peacock. That's how Mrs. Peacock got blackmailed. But it does feel a little bit of like maybe at least othering or like a little bit gross, but not to the point where I'm like, this is absolutely reprehensible. It just feels...
It's not as pointed as like Temple of Doom.
Absolutely not.
Right.
Where they also eat monkey's brains, by the way. It was a good year for monkey's brains. You had to go to your store. They were always out. You're like, when am I going to get to have monkey's brains? Everyone keeps buying up all the monkey's brains.
Yeah, growing up in this era of film made me think that I'd be facing that at a dinner party a lot more than I really have. It's never come up.
Weird. But you're coming over on Saturday. We're going to have a delicious gelatin dish. It's going to be white goo on a plate. I won't tell you what it is. But I guess it also plays into the fact that Mrs. Peacock, it's her favorite recipe. Right. So it would be very specific. The fact that you would remember it would be a very specific dish. But I don't know. It felt a little weird that there are not many people of color in this movie, I'll admit. And the fact that there's all these sort of like very exotic dishes coming out of the kitchen seems
I didn't put that together.
Specific, very specific.
It's not incredibly pointed, partially because that character, the chef, is like not in the movie hardly at all.
Right.
Like she has one moment in the beginning when she
her corpse is, but she isn't.
Well, she kind of scares Tim Curry's character with a knife in a moment, and then just says dinner will be ready. Or yes, when he asks if dinner will be ready, and that's it. That's like her only line, isn't it? And then,
I think so. Yeah.
And then we see her body later.
And she's watching the McCarthy hearings. But don't worry about it. It's just a red herring.
Oh.
Yeah, and
I thought we were talking about more dishes that were coming later when we were talking about red herring.
Oh, see? If only they hadn't cut dinner short.
Yeah.
I think the more offensive thing for Mrs. Ho, the chef, is that she's the butt of a lot of fat jokes later on. Maybe not a lot of fat jokes, but a number of fat jokes when they're moving her body around.
Like physical comedy fat jokes. Kind of.
Yeah,
like
they literally are having trouble moving her body around in a way they don't necessarily have with the singing telegram or Mr. Body later on.
Yeah.
But that also is short-lived. It's maybe 2 or 3 jokes at that expense. They're kind of cheap, but they breeze by pretty quick, I would think.
At one point, they when the cop shows up, they they have this like pretend party where they're holding up her body and Colonel
Mustard is making out with her.
Yeah,
in the curtains,
but
and Mrs. Peacock is performing the arms.
She's pretending to be the arms, just like...
And she makes a great sound, which is something like, And I can't tell if it's supposed to be her being actively traumatized or if she's trying to make like sort of, make-out sounds. It's very disturbing. That whole thing is weird. But it does make me laugh almost straight through that whole scene because you have Mr. Green, who's so nervous and anxious, having to show the cop around, but he only can show him 3 rooms. And the cop immediately takes the lead and is like, I want to know what's happening in these 2 other rooms that you're specifically not showing me. And they haven't informed Mr. Green of what their plan was. And he goes in and just sees all the other guests essentially making out with dead bodies. And then he goes to the other room, and the motorist who had been bludgeoned over the head is posed to look like he's drunk and blacked out. Also funny. And then they confront Wadsworth, who is on the phone, and he's like, I can explain everything. And he's like, you don't have to explain anything.
He's cool about it. He's like, just make it.
This is a free country, don't you know that? And Tim Curry says, I didn't know it was that free. And then the cop turns to Mr. Green, and Mr. Green gives one of the most goony smiles. Never ceases to fail to get me.
I think, spoiler, I think Michael McKean might be my secret MVP, my Catherine O'Hara. He's not the most obvious choice, I don't think, because you've got such strong performances from Tim Curry and Madeline Kahn, but he might have made me laugh the most.
I think you're I don't know if I'm going to give him the award, but I think you are on strong ground, solid ground. He does do a lot of like physical comedy in this. He's constantly like, he's sort of the, he gets wrapped up in being like a prop body for Tim Curry when Tim Curry's sort of recounting the entire movie again in the last act. One time he just
trips him with his foot.
He just trips him, and he's like, at this point, Mr. Body is dead, and he trips Mr. Green, who lands like face first onto the ground. And it's Michael McKean. It's not, they didn't like quick cut to a stunt double. It's Michael McKean falling on the floor. And then later on, he picks Michael McKean back up and then pushes him down again just for the fun of it. And he also, he like chases Michael McKean into the hallway and like hits him over the head with his hand to mimic like being hit by a candlestick. And then Mr. Green does say, "Will you stop that?" And then gets picked up and thrown into a bathroom.
But don't worry, he gets to pee. So
he does get to pee. I also like another bathroom joke with Mr. Green is during the second ending when we find out that the chef was Miss Peacock's chef. He finds out that they ate monkey's brains, and he goes, "Is that what we ate?" And he goes into the bathroom to throw up. This is actually, despite how many times I've seen this movie, this is the first time I've ever noticed this. While he's in the bathroom, Mrs. Peacock eventually just confesses that she has done it, and she holds everyone like at gunpoint. And Michael McKean comes out of the bathroom and sort of, he doesn't realize what had happened, and he realizes that she's holding everyone hostage, and he sort of like stumbles over himself, realizing that she's admitted to being the killer.
Oh, I didn't see that. Dang it.
This is a movie. I mean, I think that this is a movie, back to the ensemble cast, that you could literally watch like 7 times and decide, I'm just going to watch Michael McKean this time.
Right, yeah.
Because it's such a tight ensemble. And like, unlike the usual thing you get with an ensemble cast, this is very much, they're in the same place like most of the time. If not absolutely together, they're still in the same house. But even for the majority of the movie, they are in the same room together constantly.
It's a lot more like a play.
Yeah, it's like a stage play, I was about to say. So you could really just like choose a person that you want to focus on for a viewing. And they're all, because they're, again, such strong comic actors, they're always reacting. They're always giving you something in the background.
Yeah,
it's really kind of amazing. And in fact, you mentioned stage play. Like this sort of got, I don't know if people still do it, but for a while people were doing this like Rocky Horror, where people would perform it in front of the movie theater screen, like midnight showings.
We were talking about things that we didn't notice before. I noticed for the first time all the dog poop stuff. Like in the beginning, we just see Wadsworth like come up and he's like, he feeds the dogs this like, they're mean dogs out front, and he feeds them.
The breed is mean.
What are they,
Jim
German
Croce,
Shepherds?
I believe, wrote a song about them.
Yeah. He like gives them raw T-bones, and then as he's walking in, he like notices he steps in dog poop, and so he like wipes his feet off, but like every time he walks by them, people are like,
yeah,
and it's a bit it does like go away pretty soon, but for the first, I don't know what, like 10 minutes of the movie, it's like pretty much everyone reacts to it, and I never really, I'm sure I noticed that at some point, but I didn't like remember that.
It is it's kind of like a cheap joke.
Yeah.
But I think it is it's not my favorite joke by any means, but it is a nice sort of introduction to like, even though this will be styled very much in the format of like an Agatha Christie, like, and then there was none, and then there were none. There is like a silliness, and I think even though the movie, I think, starts out slow purposefully, they do like find some good like bits, just be like, hey, this does get sillier. Just hang with us for a little bit for the sort of table setting.
Literally.
But the poop joke. The poop joke is a little bit of a low blow, I feel like, at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, it's cheap, but it's also like,
whenever I'm forcing it on someone, I'm like, the jokes get better than this poop joke. I just want you to know that.
I do kind of like the way that some of the characters handle it, though, because they all think no one realizes it's him. And so they all think it's them, and so they all check their shoes, and they all like at first just kind of like, what is that? You know, like they don't, but no one says anything.
Yeah.
And then eventually it just goes away. I want to talk about...
Please.
We can talk more if you have more to say about the movie, but at some point I do want to talk about Clue, the game, the board game.
Well, I mean, I do have a thing to say about... I mean, we can sort of work into the game, but one of the things I don't think I realized until much later in my life of how subtly the movie actually incorporates the core gameplay of the board game.
Yeah.
They actually do... I mean, if you've never played Clue, you are playing one of the suspects, and you are moving around the house, going into different rooms, theoretically looking for clues. And that is essentially what everyone does for pretty much the second act of the movie, is that everyone splits up and they're going into different rooms and like investigating. I mean, under the auspice of like making sure that there's no one else in the house, but it does sort of mimic the gameplay of Clue. Yeah. Which I don't think I mean, I've realized before this viewing, but it took me a while to realize like, oh, this is actually the game. This is the game.
And there's secret passages from room to room, which is a very big part of the game. Apparently, this is from trivia that I did not fact check, but that they match actually what room leads to what room on the board game.
The layout of at least of the first floor does mimic the board game. The ballroom is in the back, and the kitchen and the conservatory are flanking it. And then the dining room is across from the billiard room, and then the study and the lounge are across from each other. So it's an actual set that they built, and it does match the Clue game board, at least the first floor.
I mean,
the passageways do match too.
The main thing that was different that I definitely noticed is that Lauren didn't always win every single fucking time. So it's definitely not that accurate.
To keep using like a suspect or a room that you have in your hand, and it throws the other person off thinking, oh, they think they've found something, but because they keep putting the conservatory in their accusations or their suspicions. So it must be in the conservatory, right?
Sometimes I'll see people like taking not just like the regular checkmark notes, but like copious notes. And I'm like, what am I missing here? What are you
It's just
doing?
a game of chance, Someone picked 3 cards and they put it in the envelope. You don't have to. We don't actually have to figure out where Mr. Body was earlier in the day.
Maybe they're just like throwing me off the scent. They're just like, this fucking guy. I mean, it's interesting because you see things like, what are the other... Battleship is a notorious example of like they made a movie that it was like...
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Battleship. Was there another
board
game? Has there been a Monopoly movie yet?
I mean, what was that? Big Short?
Well, Jenna Maroney in 30 Rock, she constantly references that she was in... she may have been fired from Trivial Pursuit, the movie.
That's pretty funny.
Oh, she's great. I don't know if there's any... I mean, Battleship is the most recent one.
I saw that, but I don't remember. I remember being like about what I thought.
It has a lot more aliens than the game has.
Yeah, I remember being like, I don't know how you would do this. It wasn't good, but I also wasn't mad about it because I wasn't expecting anything. You'd
also think that there was already sort of a story built into Battleship. There's like a war going on. There's no reason to build in, bring in aliens.
Yeah, but aliens are great.
Who doesn't love that Alf fella? He seems fun.
Scientists.
That's a good point. They're always trying to bring him down. I do want to talk about Mr. Green, and then I'll probably queen out over Madeline Kahn.
Oh, yeah. I want to talk about he's a homosexual.
Yes, you picked up on that text in the film.
That is what he's being blackmailed by, like that getting out.
Right. He works for the State Department, and if it were discovered that he was a homosexual, he would be fired. And for the most part, there are some exceptions. I am kind of amazed by how not shittily treated Mr. Green is for his homosexuality. I feel like the punchline about Mr. Green is that he's a klutz.
He's a dweeb,
He's a dweeb. It's not that he is like he's an effeminate gay stereotype or anything. But I will say, like, I think Michael McKean does a really good job of not... He doesn't play him completely straight, so he's like gay in name only, a gyno, if you will. But he doesn't play him.
That's when you don't actually support the gay policies, but you claim the gay label.
That's when you're Representative Aaron Schock, or Lindsey Graham, I guess, allegedly. But there are some flourishes. This time I noticed when they're going back, when they re-split up after the cop arrives, Mr. Green, who's been paired with Yvette, goes back up to the attic, and she sort of grabs his arm as they're going up the stairs, and he sort of pulls his arm away in a very like conscious, like kind of annoyed motion, which was, I can see many of my gay friends, and including myself, doing a similar motion if you did not want someone to grab your arm.
Yeah.
I also like that a lot of times his gayness is used as a punchline, not just in and of itself, but he is the only man in the group who does not want to be paired with Yvette. So naturally, he gets paired with Yvette to go into the attic together, which I think is good for both his character because it means that she doesn't have to be paired with some leering,
some lecherous
character.
Yeah.
But also like plays up the fact that he is gay, and so he is not really all that interested in whatever Yvette really has to offer, since all she seems to be able to offer is a French maid outfit, a bad French accent, and tits.
Yeah. It's incredibly ridiculous cleavage situation with Yvette.
Even now, as a grown man, that I've seen more boobs, not a lot of boobs. I think we all would have guessed, but that is monumental boobs. I have to really just hand it to her. Mazel tov, Colleen Camp. They are pushed up almost like Jessica Rabbit style to be like, how is this working, madam? But I just wanted to say that I mean, there are some moments where it feels a little like I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife is a clumsy line in and of itself, but it's clumsy because it's like, just to reiterate, this guy ain't gay.
Yeah, right.
It's not like hyper offensive, but it's like, okay.
See, I thought that was like, and maybe I'm giving too much credit, but like I read that as like he's playing up the fact that he's not gay in front of the other FBI.
Oh, you think
cops.
he's still gay?
That's how I read it, and I don't know if that's what they meant or not. But he's like playing straight, like to the nth degree, by being like, I'm definitely going to have intercourse with this other woman who is. I
enjoy having sex with my wife. And did you see the tits on that dead lady back there? That's interesting. I never thought of it that way because, now the FBI and the cops are there. J. Edgar Hoover is an expert in Armageddon. The only other thing I was going to say is that the other male characters, when he has a very good coming out scene where he says, I'm not going to wait for Wadsworth here to unmask me. I work for the State Department and I'm a homosexual. And I have to keep that secret under security grounds. And then there's like an awkward pause where just like no one really responds. And he goes, thank you. And he sits back down again. And Christopher Lloyd immediately gets up, which I think is like a gay panic joke. Yeah. But I always read that more like Christopher Lloyd's character sucks than Mr. Green sucks. Maybe that's, again, giving the movie too much credit. But I feel like everyone here is pretty much a shitbag.
Right.
So it makes sense that this adulterous doctor who, steps all over the Hippocratic Oath and fucks his patients seems like probably also a homophobe.
Yeah, and I mean, for a movie made in 1985, released in 1985, created, like, set in the 50s, they did pretty well for, like, for it. I don't want to give it too much credit or anything, but it was like, I was like, they have a gay character, there's a reason that it comes out, and it's not, like, a huge plot point. You know what I mean? Like, it's not brushed over, but it's also like they don't really ever bring it up again, other than what you mentioned, like with Yvette, and then at the end, which I'm not really sure now if my interpretation was right or wrong.
Hey, your headcanon is just as valid as anyone else's.
It does make it more awkward if it's your way, though. Like if it's actually the movie being like, see, this guy was straight all along, then it's like, ooh, that's weird. But my way is like, no, he's acting. He's pretending to act. You know what I mean?
I guess I always took his confident smile at that moment as like the that is the truth.
Right.
Rather than like having, I feel like if it was, and I'm not trying to shit all over your view.
No.
Viewing is just as creative an act as creating.
Sure.
That's
what you say to untalented people like me.
I feel like if you were like having him lie again because, the FBI's there, you would play it up a little bit more as him being nervous or shifty or whatever. But that is an interesting interpretation. I did like that. Yeah, that was the takeaway that, wow, a movie in 1985 didn't make him a punchline for being gay. They made a punchline because he's a klutz.
Right. Yeah. Which is like, that's the thing with you gays. You can be just as klutzy and terrible as anybody else.
Right. Thank you, Obergefell.
Quality. Do you want to talk about Madeline?
Love is love.
Speaking of being gay, you've been sitting here waiting to talk about Madeline Kahn for 40 minutes.
I think, as cliche and as sort of basic bitch pumpkin spice latte as it might be, I really have to give her, for me, the Catherine O'Hara Award, Memorial and VIP Award. She, it's hard to run away with this movie, but she has a lot of my favorite moments in this. She, her talk about her husbands are great. He had threatened several times to kill me in public. Why would he want to kill you in public? I think she means he threatened in public to kill her. And then the talk about her illusionist, which I think as a kid, that I remember that being my favorite line, aside from the flame speech. But your husband disappeared under mysterious circumstances. That was his job. He was an illusionist. He never reappeared. He wasn't a very good illusionist. She says it just so matter of fact. I love that she's just pretty much like, I didn't do it. She's barely trying to cover up the fact that she killed 2 of her husbands. Yeah. I was out all day at the movies. Just barely even trying to come up with a motive. She also, I love that moment when they're, during the Peacock ending, where they're singing She's a Jolly Good Fellow, trying to pretend they're congratulating her for killing all those people.
She goes an octave up.
She does an octave up, and she's singing off key because Madeline Kahn was also a really good singer. I love her so much. The slurping in the dinner table, it's so awkward and weird with her and Christopher Lloyd slurping their soup. And she doesn't wear glasses, so she can't remove them constantly. I do love she asked to get out of the house, and Wadsworth's like, no man in his right mind would be alone together with you. And then later, of course, her and Wadsworth get paired up with the matches, and she gives him a very serious look, like she's going to murder him. She also has a great line when she's lost upstairs, and she's trying to sound tough and vicious to a potential killer that might be in the room. She's like, are you hiding? I'm coming. It's so awkward. So let's talk about flames on the side of my face, just really quick.
Yeah. She's been, in case you haven't seen it, she's talking about Yvette and why she killed her at that moment? Or,
yeah, over the course of the movie, we find that Yvette and Mrs. White knew each other because Yvette had an affair with one of Mrs. White's husbands that she killed, probably the one she cut his penis off while she was at the movies all day. And then she killed Yvette. It's revealed in the third ending where everyone has a murder under their sleeve. And Wadsworth calls her out and he says, you were jealous that your husband was stooping Yvette, and that's why you killed him too. And she's on the stairs and she comes down and she says, yes, I did it. I hated her so much that flames on the side of my face, breathless, heaving breaths, and then Wadsworth cuts her off. I mean, this is everyone's favorite line in this movie. It's such a great moment. If you talk about Clue, it's the first thing that almost anyone will quote. I have a lapel pin. It's an enamel pin. It's Mrs. White in her veil from when she first enters the house, but she has these giant flames coming out of the side of her face. I love her so much, and I want to talk about why this is such a great moment, aside from the simple fact that it is just really funny. We've talked many times about the fact that this is an ensemble movie. Yeah. And so most of the time, it's a very claustrophobic movie. This movie has a motif of people being crammed in doorways, Mr. Green and Yvette trying to cram themselves up the stairs at the exact same pace. Yeah. People shoving their way into doorways and just being crammed in there. People knocking at the front door and the entire guest roster comes to the door to answer it. That's a very it's not necessarily claustrophobic, but it's a movie that's always conscious about everyone being on camera and knowing where everyone is at any moment. And this is a very unique, almost unique scene in this movie where the camera completely commits to Madeline Kahn right then. And she comes down the stairs and the camera moves with her, and she's pretty much the only person in frame. And we also talked about it's a really tightly scripted movie. There's a lot of rat-a-tat, well-delivered lines by really good comic actors. I mean, there's a lot of really fast dialogue, and no one ever stumbles over anything. It's really big. And then you have this speech, and it's a really wind-up speech. Wadsworth is obviously setting the T-ball on top of the little stand, and he's ready for Madeline Kahn to hit it out of the park, and then she sort of throws you off because she purposefully punts this wonderful speech, because instead of delivering a grandiose speech, she delivers this rambling nonsense that never really goes anywhere. So she's just sort of, where everything else in this movie is really tightly scripted, she's just sort of rambling and repeating words and not really getting to a point. And then on top of that, Wadsworth cuts her off because he's you're not going to ever say anything of note in this speech, so let's just move on. It's so good. I love it so much. That
feels really real to anyone who's experienced that, a level of rage where you can't, it's literally she can't even speak.
She can't even.
The only thing my only criticism of that moment is that it felt, because it is a really unique moment and that's what makes it great, it also felt a little bit where did this come from? I wanted more of this. I wanted her to have, not just even her, but if there were other moments like this where it was more I don't know, it's a different kind of silly. It's almost a completely different kind of humor than any other moment in the movie, which makes it stand out and be great. But it's also what? It's a little bit out of left field, which again, this is not a deep criticism, but it more makes me go like there's one chocolate chip and a vanilla ice cream cone. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, I want more of that. Pour more of that on there.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I do think, though, one of the strengths of this movie is that it has like a different variety of jokes like throughout it. There's a dog poop joke. There's sex jokes. There's communism like references.
A lot of physical comedy.
A lot of like slapstick physical comedy. A lot of wordplay, puns even, and then you have this
like grammar.
I think according to Michael McKeon or someone, maybe it was Jonathon Lynn, the writer, said this is an improvised speech. This is Madeline Kahn just going off, and it is. I think it is. I like that it is completely unique, like just thrown into this movie. Like it's just here's another style of joke we could have done, but we just did it once.
Right.
It's great, and I love that Madeline Kahn, of course, gets it to herself.
Right.
I just love it.
It is good. It is very good. I honestly didn't like having seen this movie a bit, but not like a ton growing up. I didn't really appreciate it until you would quote it when we were roommates, especially. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then
why are you just rambling and repeating the same 3 words over and over again?
Yeah. Would you like to go to the verdict?
I think we're ready.
Here, play the music from Clue. Damon Xanthopoulos. What is your verdict?
This movie's great. Like, obviously. It's great. I mean, for all the reasons I've already said. It's also 90 minutes, another thing. I mean,
love that.
I don't want to say that all movies have to be 90 minutes, but I think a lot more movies could be 90 minutes than they are.
Yes, that is 100% true.
I think that I really enjoy this. I think the cast is like superb. I think you see the confidence of like older actors and also like generous actors in that they are all like playing in an ensemble. There's no like breakaway star in this. Madeline Kahn. It's just a fantastic movie. I think it also is like buoyed by the fact that it's set in the 50s. Even though it's an 80s movie, it's set in the 50s, so you don't have to deal with like
Brad. Just somebody saying Brad all the time.
Madeline Kahn coming in on a skateboard or something.
Martin Mull just doing the drum fill from In the Air Tonight.
Michael McKean in his Reagan Bush 84 t-shirt. It's just so great. And I love that it's gotten sort of a second life from video rentals like in the 80s and 90s and sort of has a cult following now. My brother, actually, I was texting him that we were doing this, and he said, I was reading a listicle of overrated movies, and when Clue came up on the listicle, I knew that article wasn't for me. And he closed the tab. I think it's just so fun. I think it is a fun... it's one of my favorite movies, but I think it's a great like Saturday afternoon movie. It's raining out. Let's watch Clue. It's good if you're a scaredy cat like us to watch on Halloween. It's just so great. And I think it's also a good reminder of like what a small little movie can be. It's pretty much one set. It's all pretty much like B or C level actors, at least at this point in their careers. It's such a strong movie in so many ways. Yeah, Your Inner Child is not an idiot. I was so smart as a kid to know that this was a great movie.
I'm going to have to agree. That was a close one.
Almost my heart was in my throat.
DJ was found dead that day. I do think that if there was any verdict that you would murder me over, it'd be this one. No, I think this was not as much of a thing for me growing up as it was for you, but I did always like it. I mean, anytime you've got just like Tim Curry being silly running around, and even as a kid, I'm like, that's fun. I really like
more Butler running movies.
I mean, that was always what I remembered is just him reenacting the whole thing, like the whole last 15, 20 minutes. It's
a surprisingly like risky. I mean, I don't want to keep stepping on your verdict.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a surprisingly risky venture to be like, and Act 3 will just tell you what happened in Act 1 and then 2. So we'll just be doing that. And I'm like, that is risky, and like it holds up. It like is very fast paced for one, thank God.
Right.
But it like keeps like the momentum like starts going faster and faster at that point, and it's really enjoyable.
It's madcap, I would say.
One might say.
I like that. Like you kind of like if you're paying attention or like writing it down, you can kind of follow, but it also kind of doesn't matter. Like,
yeah, I mean, the mystery doesn't why would Mr. Body's butler, Li Ving, if you are following the story of the third plot line, why would he pretend to be Mr. Body? It's so obvious that they would try and kill the man who's blackmailing them, not some random butler. Why would you go along with this plan?
Yeah, it doesn't. It holds up enough, but it also like doesn't matter if you really follow it because the fun is like the characters and the lines. I think I got a lot out of just like you said, the sort of rat-a-tat, the quick line delivery. I was like, there's some really fun wordplay, and it's also very of the throwback era, like of the 40s and 50s when people are doing the more of that like fast talking radio voice, like that's got that kind of vibe, but not in an annoying way, like in a way that like kind of makes sense. It's hard for me to just single out Madeline Kahn, like, because I appreciate that. I mean, the speech is great. It's wonderful. She's really funny. But also, like, there's so few people that you could pluck out of this movie and it still be as strong. Absolutely. Like, Tim Curry is amazing and he's carrying it. It's obviously like more of a star vehicle for him.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if I had to say, if anyone's movie, it's probably Tim Curry's movie.
Yeah, when he's playing
Give it to the white man, says DJ. Give it to the straight white man? Jury's still out on that one.
I don't know. Like Christopher Lloyd doesn't have like a ton of laugh lines, but he's also like not playing a particularly funny character. Like and I think he does a good job. He's like a sleazebag, and it's kind of funny. And I mean, I loved Michael McKean. We talked about like I thought he was probably the one that I was surprised by how funny I found it. And I think I was just say Leslie Ann Warren like seemed like she was trying the hardest, but I also kind of enjoyed like how much her character seemed to be having fun with all this.
No,
like she's like kind of like, well, this is fucking crazy. Like, and she's like along for the ride. And so it was kind of fun to see that.
Well, she also is the only person being blackmailed who has no regrets about what she's being blackmailed for. She's just like, yeah, whatever. I pay off a lot of people. I'll pay off Mr. Body. Who cares? Right.
She's kind of in the blackmail business already, so it's not like a big deal for her. But anyway, Your Inner Child is Not an Idiot. Loved it. I agree that it's a good, like, rewatchable, movie because you can catch new things. It's not a perfect movie. There are a couple things that might make you cringe, but it's not like as gross as it could be, especially given the era it came out. Yeah, we could definitely throw up flags about, how they treat the women in the movie, and there's not very many people of color and stuff, and I think that's all fair, but it's also like it was a movie from 1985, where it could be it could and has been a lot worse in other movies from the era or even much later. What do you think?
I will say, I think I don't know. I mean, some of the women have maybe sort of fall into certain stereotypes, like the Black Widow character that Madeline Kahn plays. The vamping French maid is probably the most like, okay, but I don't know. I love that all three of the women can like hold their own against the three men. They're not like just like, I feel like if they constantly threaten, maybe not to necessarily remake this movie, but to make a new Clue movie based on the board game. And I can only imagine like that they would get like young starlets to play these the female characters. And I really just think like the fact that they got like just great character actresses rather than just getting young
that are in like their 30s, 40s, 50s, not in their 20s and 20s.
Right. It just makes this movie so much stronger that the women can hold their own against the men rather than just like the men being the funny ones and the women being pretty.
Right.
God, I love it. Take your hands off me. I'm a senator's wife. I have to say that. That's my brother's. He used to like to scream that when we were children.
What do you think, everybody? Your Inner Child is an Idiot at gmail.com. You can leave us a voicemail or text us 615-576-0525. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on a little bit of Twitter, a little bit of
Slither.
Facebook.
Also, you can find us on Slither, the movie Slither. We're featured
you can find us
in that
in
movie.
the background of one part of Slither. Also, Sliver, which is that the one with Sharon Stone?
I thought that was Slither. Which one's Slither?
Slither is the one where there's like an alien, like a snake alien.
Oh, it's like a slug, right? Oh,
Yeah.
Slither was that Sharon Stone movie. The only reason I remember that movie is because it's referenced in a contemporaneous Simpsons episode. And that's the only reason that it survives in my mind. But yes, you are absolutely right. There is this Sharon Stone movie named Slither.
And
I think people were being filmed on televisions.
You can also find us on Silver, the Lone Ranger's horse.
We got a weekend getaway, and we're going to use the Groupon. Thank you.
We want to thank our patrons for supporting the show, including Travis Vance.
Josh Frigo. Frigo?
Yep.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Josh, write in and let me know.
Damon's Australian accent.
His Honor the Mayor.
Dan McIntyre.
Beth Surmont.
David Mort. Or Moore, if you're French.
Bonjour. Jonathon Day.
The supreme ruler of this podcast.
Got a promotion, Jonathon. Just Cuz.
Scalfasaurus.
Dr. Malcolm's Heaving Bosom.
Heather Tuggle.
Tyler Richardson.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Karen Curd.
Lindsey Nell.
The Zesty.
Jacob Grimm.
Particle Man.
Dramatically placed hot dog.
Just thinking about that hot dog still makes me laugh. I don't want you to forget that dramatically placed hot dog. Larissa Maestro.
T. Smith.
Jeremy Powlen.
And Kevin from Cleveland. Thank you all very, very, very much. We really appreciate your support. If you want to support the show like them, patreon.com/yourinnerchildsandidiot or yourinnerchildsandidiot.com. Damon is going to play us out as if he's Madeline Kahn reading
I like this setup because I don't know where it's going.
the track listing from the new reissued Taylor Swift album.
Oh, yeah. Well, I hated Jake Gyllenhaal so much that I left my scarf at his house, and I think it's at Maggie Gyllenhaal's house now. Maggie Gyllenhaal's wearing it.
That was better than I could have possibly imagined. Thank you.